So thank you all for coming. As Teresa said, my name is Eileen Wood. I am from St. William Parish in Tewksbury. Tewksbury is, this is one of the closer events because I go all throughout New England and even into New York. And so like last weekend we were in Hopewell Junction, New York, so it's like 3.5 hours away. So this is only about 35, 40 minutes, and it's nice to be closer to home, right? So if any of you are familiar with St. William Parish, we have perpetual adoration 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and we've been open for 17 years. And that kind of plays into how I got started in this. So a lot of times people ask, well, how did you get into this? Where did, you have this exhibit, you're doing these talks. I never set out to, be a public speaker or a Catholic public speaker. It just, I don't know, the Holy Spirit was just directing this and things happened. But in a nutshell, what happened was about 18 years ago, I was at a parish council meeting at my parish, and I'm sure I was kind of half paying attention, probably doodling on the agenda, and I hear Father say something like, we had a 40-hour devotion just like a couple weeks before, and he said, that 40-hour devotion went really well. I'm so happy, I'm so excited about how it went. And I really feel like God is calling me and this parish to adoration 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Eileen, would you help me with that? I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I just heard my name. I better be paying attention here. Oh, yeah, sure, Father, sounds great. And in reality, I had some experience with perpetual adoration. There was a chapel in Lowell for a number of years. At this point, it had closed. The parish had closed, and they moved it to a couple different locations, and it just wasn't able to stay open. So there was no more perpetual in our area. And then now there's another church in Lowell that has perpetual, but that started much later. And so there was this void, and I had always kind of had this little, scratchy itch in the back of my brain, like, wouldn't it be cool to run a perpetual adoration chapel? But it just seemed like some little fantasy thing. I never thought that would actually really happen. And so I just kind of, ignored it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, here's this priest, my pastor, who, it was his idea. And he's like, I was surprised. I didn't think that he was thinking along those lines. He had never hinted that to me. And all of a sudden, here he is saying, I want to do this. I mean, I talked to so many people would love to have it at their parish, and they're begging their pastor to do something, and he's not that interested. And here, my pastor, it's his idea, and he's asking me to help. So I was like, okay, sure. And so we were kind of off and running. So that was like just a little over 18 years ago. We spent the next 4, 5, 6 months preparing the parish, educating people as to what adoration is, what is perpetual, what would a commitment be looking like. And then we opened in the fall of that year. So it was November of 2006, and we opened on the Feast of Christ the King. So now we've been open about 17 and a half years, right through COVID, right through blizzards and everything else. Okay. I just ignore whatever. I'm not going to pay attention to anything. It'll work out. So anyway, about 13 years ago, we were preparing for our 5th anniversary. And I was really excited, like, oh, it's our 5th anniversary. This is great. We want to mark this occasion. I was looking for something to commemorate that. And I was talking to different speakers or looking for some sort of event, and I couldn't find anything. And I was really praying about it, like, God, like, what can we do? I want to celebrate our 5th anniversary. And so around that time, we drove to Chicago. Our oldest daughter, as Teresa said, we have 6 daughters. Our oldest daughter was graduating from college. And I'm from Chicago originally, so we had made that trip many times. You don't need a GPS, you don't need a map, you just put your foot on the gas, get on Route 90, and you just go. About 1,000 miles later, you show up in Chicago. So we had driven overnight and just made it to the graduation. I think we had something going on and we couldn't leave earlier. And the next day, we're coming home and we're like, well, we did the overnight drive, why don't we just, splurge for a hotel, we'll sleep someplace. Well, we're in the middle of Ohio. Now, Ohio has a lot of big cities off Route 90, and we're trying to find a place to stay. And we're on the phone, calling. There's no hotel anywhere off Route 90. And we ended up finding a hotel finally when we were exhausted, like 30 minutes off the road, which seemed really ridiculous to us that we'd have to go that far off to get a hotel. So we go to sleep that night. The next morning, we went to Mass, and it happened to be the Feast of Corpus Christi. I don't even remember what the town is. I have no idea. But at the end of Mass, the priest said, I'd like to invite you all across the parking lot to our school building, and in the gymnasium we have an exhibit we'd like to share with you. was, you can imagine, it was this exhibit. And I instantly knew two things. One, this is what I wanted to do for our anniversary. This is what we're going to make this happen somehow. We're going to get it from Ohio or something. We're going to make this happen. And two, this is why there was no hotel 30 minutes off, for 30 minutes, because God was leading us to this exhibit. Somehow he booked every hotel or whatever. So, what they say, God writes straight with crooked lines. So that's how I found it. And I figured out the person who was in charge of it for the U.S. She sent me a DVD that had all the posters, like in the high-res form. Now, my husband and I have our own company. This is actually not our job. We are engineers. We both have masters in fire protection engineering. My husband's also an attorney. And we have our own consultancy company that does fire investigations. So we do fire forensics. We investigate fires and explosions and do expert witness testimony. So because of that, we had a wide format printer in the office, so it prints on these rolls of paper. So I printed like all these posters, all the English ones. I just started printing and printing. I bought paper, rolls of paper, ink and more ink, and we just kept printing. So I spent the next several months printing. My husband built the wooden stands that's holding them 13 years ago. So they're still in use, in business. And by November of that year, we had the exhibit. We had it for our parish. And I always had it in the back of my mind as I was doing all this work for it, like that we would share this with other parishes. I mean, it's a lot of work for, a one-time event. And I said, we can, our whole goal was to promote the Eucharist. So let's get this out there. Now, initially, I had no idea where it came from. It was called the Vatican International Exhibit of Eucharistic Miracles. So I thought that maybe a committee of bishops in the Vatican put it together. I mean, I had no idea. Like, I really had, it was just, that's what it was. I didn't know who Blessed Carlo was. I didn't know that a single person did it, much as a young boy. And about maybe 5 years ago or so, a friend of mine sent me a text message and says, hey, look at this. There's this young boy in Italy. They think he's going to be the first millennial saint. He was like a real computer geek, and, blah, blah, blah. They're going to exhume his body soon. And he's the one who did this exhibit, the exhibit you have. And I'm like, what exhibit? She's like, the one you're showing. Like, I had no idea what she was talking about at first, even though I had the exhibit, but I didn't know what person had done, a single person had done it. So now I'm interested. So I start to, read about him and learn about his life. And like I said, I didn't know who he was. And when it first came, when I was first doing this for the first maybe 8 years of the exhibit, I would show up to a parish and I would just set it up. And then 3-4 days later, a week later, I would come back and I'd pick it up. I would never interact with any of the people. And finally, one parish asked me, he says, well, can someone do a talk? Like, it'd be nice to have a little event. Somebody can do a talk with, while the exhibit's up. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, we should get somebody to do a talk. Yeah, so who wants to do a talk? Anyone? Anyone? Hearing no volunteers, I guess I'll do a talk. So that's how, I had never intended to, be a speaker. I mean, I had an organization that would bring out speakers. I wasn't intended to be the talent. I was just organizing it. I was the Teresa and Ornella, the two ladies here who have been organizing all this. That's what I did. I wasn't supposed to be the one in front of the microphone. So anyway, okay, I saw a need. There was a void. I started talking. And another day I was at adoration and I didn't even know what I was particularly praying about. Maybe, I'm not sure I was praying about anything in particular. I was just sitting, before the Blessed Sacrament, and I just had this inspiration. I mean, I didn't hear any voices, but in my heart, I just knew, it was, get a first-class relic of Blessed Carlo. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. How do I get a relic? I'm just a person. Why would they give me a relic? How does this work? And I kind of argued with myself for a while, and finally I was like, well, if this is a real inspiration, I'll work toward it and I'll get the relic. And if it's just my own crazy idea, then I guess nothing will happen, but who cares? I'm no worse off than I am now. And so I just started looking at websites and contacting, sending out emails and figuring out, how do I get this relic? And sure enough, I end up with a relic. And I have two right now, but the first one I got was I got it right on his birthday about 2 years ago. Carlo's birthday is on May 3rd. And it was just May 1st or May 2nd. And already I had the first talk at my own parish on May 3rd, which is his birthday, and we already had a miracle that first day. So I was kind of wow, there's already healing that first night. And since then, we've had probably about eight healings. So just incredible things. I say, like, when the Holy Spirit is running the show, you just, when he's taking you on a journey, you just put your seatbelt on and go along for the ride, because you don't really know what's going to happen next. And I have a whole other story to tell on Saint Manuel, the other saint over here. But I was doing this. I was having the exhibit, right? I had the relic at this point. We were having some healings, and I was doing the talks. And then I happened to be in Spain a little over a year ago, and I'm in Seville. I'm on vacation. Okay, I'm total. My daughter was living there. I'm just on vacation visiting her, and who don't I run into in downtown Seville? Now, Seville is about the same size as Boston. Okay, just if you look at the population. I mean, Boston might be bigger because of Cambridge and stuff, but it's still a really big city. And I'm walking around. I'm downtown Seville, and I run into Blessed Carlos' mother. Like, is that crazy? I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, she's not Spanish, she's Italian. She lives in Italy. She does not live in Spain. She happened to be in Spain for just a few days for something when I was. So I introduced myself to her. I said, I knew who she was. I said, I have a relic of Carlo. I have the exhibit with all the posters. I'm out every weekend showing the exhibit. And I said, we've already had like four miracles at that point. And so right away she gives me her personal phone number, her email, and she says, oh, come visit me in Italy. So I did. She comes to say, come visit me, all right. So last August, I went to Italy, and it's just crazy, because then a friend of mine says, hey, you should do a pilgrimage. He happens to work for a pilgrimage company. And I'm like, no. I didn't even give it a second thought, like, no, I'm not doing a pilgrimage. I said, I'm like so busy, I have this, how am I gonna do a pilgrimage? Well, he actually works for a pilgrimage company, and so even though I told him no, it's just, I keep thinking about it, it keeps gnawing at me, and then I meet this priest, and this priest says, oh yeah, we should do this pilgrimage. So the next step, who knows where this is going, we got a pilgrimage going to Italy this October. If anybody wants to join us, there's flyers on the thing. But we are gonna be in Assisi on October 12th, right where Carlos' body is, and his mother has agreed to greet the pilgrims. So, she's gonna meet everybody privately. Like, how often do you get a chance to meet the mother of a saint? It's kind of crazy, right? And by the way, on this pilgrimage, I'm learning stuff, because I didn't even know how any pilgrimages worked. I'd never been on one. And they said, well, do you want to make it a fundraiser? I was like, what do you mean? And they said, oh, because, sometimes people, when they do pilgrimages, all these famous, whatever, they'll add $200, $300, $400 to every ticket. And then that's like, for how many people go, that's like your fundraiser. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm inviting my family, my friends. So I promise you there's not one penny added to this. I said, no, absolute basement price, like whatever the hotel, the airfare, the food, like that's it. I'm not making any money on it. So please, I hope you can all join me, because we'll open more buses. So if you fill the first bus, we'll open another bus. The first bus is almost full, actually. We'll have another bus and another bus. It'll be a great time, and maybe we'll be there for the canonization, who knows? And I think it's going to happen in 2025, but it'll be a good trip regardless. So that's kind of how I ended up here with this. And it's just grown over the years. Like, somebody would say, okay, we need it in Spanish. We're a Spanish parish. Okay, so I print them in Spanish. I have the entire exhibit in Spanish. And then this time, the first time ever, we're showing in Portuguese. They said, oh, we have a Portuguese community, a Brazilian community. They speak Portuguese. We have a bunch of posters in Portuguese. And it just keeps going little by little. Saint Manuel is a whole other story, and I had actually given a talk on him yesterday morning, but because I think a lot of people missed it, today at 4 o'clock, so this exhibit was supposed to end at 3, but we've decided that we're not closing the doors at 3, so we'll be open to at least 5. And in addition, if you want, if you're still around, at 4 o'clock I will talk on Saint Manuel, which is it's its own story. So, and the reason they're important, because people don't know who he is, but the reason they're both important together is because, as you know, the bishops right now are having that 3-year Eucharistic Revival, and there's a big conference in Indianapolis in July. So Bishop Cousins, who's the head of that conference, really had a brilliant thought. And what he did was he made the 2 patron saints of this Eucharistic Revival, Blessed Carlo and Saint Manuel. So you may not know who Saint Manuel is. Most people don't. 2 years ago, I didn't know who he was either. I promise you. 2 years ago, I had no idea who he was. But he is part of this Eucharistic Revival, and there was such brilliance, because I think that God is looking for 2 things for all of us. He's really looking for our salvation and our sanctification. And for many, many people, that salvation is going to come through the work of Blessed Carlo, the work in his exhibit, the person he was. But then the next step, that deeper sanctification, is going to be Saint Manuel. And anybody here who's already a daily Mass attendee, who goes to adoration, you definitely want to hear more about Saint Manuel. But back to Carlo. So what about Carlo? So I think a lot of people know who he is, but just because we have a big general audience, I'm just going to hit some highlights of his life, and for some of you it's a review. But Carlo was born on May 3rd of 1991. He was actually born in London, but he lived only there for a few months. His family moved back to Italy when he was a few months old, like in September, I think, of that year. He died on October 12th of 2006. So he was only 15 and a half. He was very, very young. And he was modern, he was recent. I mean, for most of us, I'm sure, I know there's some little ones here, but aside from the little ones, for most of us, we were alive, a lot of us, his entire life. Like, most people here were born before 1991, I think, right? Yeah? Yes, yes, some people were born before 1991. And certainly most of us were alive, in 2006, even some of the younger ones might have been alive then. Let's see, it bridges my two daughters, because my second daughter was just born but 3 months before Carlo, and my youngest was born just a couple weeks after he passed away, so she's 17. So sometimes when I talk to confirmation students, it's like, a lot of them are really disconnected. They're not going to Mass, they're really not, don't understand anything about the faith, and you start talking about saints, they're just like, yeah, whatever. They're thinking of saints in the 11th, 12th, 13th century. You got somebody in Europe, in a monastery or a convent. It's just not in any way something that our high school kids can relate to. Now, to be clear, all of the saints have something to offer us, or they wouldn't be canonized saints, right? We can learn and deepen our spirituality from all of them. But when you're trying to deal with high school kids who are really disconnected, you got to kind of make some sort of connection here. And here in the person of Carlo is a kid who was so much like them. He dressed like them. He had friends. He did the same activities that they did, right? He played soccer. He played the saxophone. He went to a prep school. How many saints can you think of that had a cell phone? Like, right? Even the most modern of saints, you've got Mother Teresa, John Paul II. There's no pictures of them with a cell phone. That's just not how we even think of them, right? But in Carlo, it's somebody you can almost feel like you can reach out and touch. He had a lot of pets. He loved his, cats and dogs, and he loved animals, right? So a lot of kids have pets at home. Now, Carlo was an only child, and many kids today are only children, so that's also somewhere they can relate to him. And I think one place they maybe not relate to him is he was very, very wealthy. His family is extremely wealthy, and they have homes all over, and they have servants and stuff. So maybe that's an area where we depart from most kids. But in so many other ways, he's so much like them. And so this is something you can make, say, you know what? Pay attention to this kid. He's going to be in heaven. He's our first millennial saint, right? And another way that many of these kids can relate to Carlo is that sometimes we think of saints as coming from these holy, holy families. Mom and dad are daily communicants. Every night we pray the family rosary and things like that, right? And there's many saints who came from homes like that, for sure. But then Carlo was he came from a different family background. In fact, his mother would say, if you asked her on a Sunday afternoon, like today, like this afternoon, have you been to Mass yet? She said she would laugh and say, oh, yes, I've been to Mass. I've been to Mass for my first Holy Communion and for my confirmation and for my wedding. So before Carlo, she had been to Mass a total of 3 times in her life. And here she's got this little boy who's just in love with Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament. He wants to go to Mass every day. When they're walking around downtown, he pops into the church. I want to stop and pray. Even as a little toddler, before he even made First Communion, he always wants to go in the church and wants to bring flowers to the Blessed Mother. Now, again, his family was very wealthy. He had a nanny from Poland, and the Polish nanny knew her faith, and she instructed him on the faith a lot. So he learned a lot from her. He was also 4 years old when his grandfather died, and his grandfather appeared to him and told him he was in purgatory and he needed prayers. And so right away he starts praying for his grandfather. And he didn't even understand what that meant at first, but that's what the Polish nanny's instructing him. So he was the one who brought his family back to church. He was the one. His mother always says he was like her little savior, that he brought her to Christ. because she wasn't catechized. She didn't know her faith. And so her son's asking questions she has to learn. So he was also the same way with his classmates. He was always trying to, and the servants in the house, right? He was converting his servants, the man of the house, who was the head of the house, whatever title that is. He was from the Brahmin class. His father was like a Brahmin priest, like in Hinduism. And this man, Carlo talked to him so much about the Blessed Sacrament and Holy Communion. The guy had this hungering for it, and he converted. And then a while later, his mother came to visit, that man's mother, and then she becomes Catholic. So when he was only in first grade, like most children make first communion in second grade, but he was very young, he knew who Jesus was, and he got special permission for the priest to get Holy Communion a year earlier than his classmates. So he makes his first Holy Communion a year earlier. From that day on, he wants to go to Mass every day. Mass every day, Rosary every day, confession every week or every other week, adoration every day. He would either go before Mass or after Mass and spend another hour just praying before the Blessed Sacrament. I mean, he'd be out with his friends all day. They'd be playing soccer, they'd be having fun, he'd be on the phone with them, he'd be chatting, he'd be just like a regular kid, helping friends with homework, whatever. But they all knew at a certain time, his parish had an evening Mass. At a certain time, Carlo's going to go off to pray. And they knew. So as soon as he got First Communion, this is his life, right? And he made confirmation around 11. And at that point, he started teaching the younger kids. He started doing catechism classes. Or even his classmates. I think he was actually teaching confirmation. And it really pained him that a lot of his friends weren't going to Mass. I mean, forget about daily Mass. They weren't going to Mass on Sunday. And even Sundays that go to church, he said, Sundays the priests, they don't look like they're celebrating with much reverence. And Carlo, being the person he is not saying any of this in judgment. It's not looking down on people. Oh, why are they, not celebrating Mass well, or why are they not going to church? There's bad people. No, he took at it. He looked at it as if they must not understand, because if they truly understood who that was on the altar, after consecration, that's really Jesus, and that Jesus should be our best friend, and that we should love Jesus with all our heart, just like he did. Because they would never miss Mass on Sunday. They'd want to go every day, and they want to go before the Blessed Sacrament and pray, and the priest would be celebrating it with so much reverence. So his conclusion was, they don't understand, and therefore, I'm going to help educate them. And that was his thought. So he's 11 years old, and he starts to ask his parents to take him out. I mean, he can't drive, right? He's 11. So every weekend, he's taking his parents out to all these parishes throughout Europe that had some sort of Eucharistic miracle. And then he'd take pictures, and he'd get information from whoever, whatever was at the parish, and he'd go home and he'd start to document this. He's on the computer all night long, very late into the night, putting together this exhibit. This exhibit was originally on the computer. He did all this work when he was 11 or 12 years old. All right, is that incredible? Now, to clarify one thing, when you walk around the exhibit, you will see a few posters that are dated after 2006, like after he died. There's 2011, 2013, 2008. He did the bulk of the work. There were a few things added after he died. The first 159 posters was his exhibit. And then after he died, they said, well, a couple new ones happened, and this is pretty dramatic. We want to include this, so they added to his work. But don't be fooled by those few. The vast majority of it, the inspiration, the original concept was all his. I mean, the posters, the artwork, not just content, he did everything. And you'll think, as incredible as that is, the original exhibit was 159 posters. This is only a quarter of his work, because he made 3 other exhibits afterward. He did one on angels and demons, one on hell, purgatory, and heaven, and the last one before he died was on the Blessed Virgin Mary. And each one is 100, 120, 150 posters. They're each of this substantial amount. So this is what he was doing with his free time, right? So Carlo had, he had this real gift of temperance, this virtue of temperance and understanding. So sometimes, some saints, offered so many sacrifices and lived in the desert and, who knows what, for years and years and years. And I don't know if that's God's calling to them. I can't say that they're doing the wrong thing, right? But Carlo, living in our age, has something for us to offer. He has this virtue of temperance where he enjoys the goodness of life. Like, he loved Nutella, okay? And he loved the beautiful sunset in nature. He loved to play video games. But he also knew how to balance his time. And so he would say, I don't want to be a slave to these things. And so, God, thank you for all the goodness you give me. He's happy to enjoy that goodness, and thank God for it. But then he says, sometimes, I'm going to give back. So I'm not going to have dessert today. I'm not going to eat Nutella. It's Friday. We'll fast from Nutella, his favorite food. I'm not going to, and the video games. When I talk to the kids, they love this. He loved video games, just like so many of our kids today. But he limited himself. His mother was very clear this wasn't from her. This was him. He said, I don't want to be a slave to these games and being always on the computer in this way. He was on the computer doing that stuff, right? But he said, I'm only going to play video games for 1 hour per week. And when I talk to the grade school kids and I start to say that, they think I'm going to say like 1 hour per day, and they're already starting to have they're starting to hyperventilate. By the time I say 1 hour per week, they're like on the floor, because it's like, but he didn't just say, oh, never, 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 I'm not going to have dessert, I'm never going to have, sugar or Nutella, I'm never going to play a video game, he didn't say this, I'm going to enjoy these good things that God gives us. Thank you, Jesus. You made this beautiful world for us. You made these delicious foods like Nutella or whatever your favorite food is. You made these fun games to play. I'm going to enjoy that. So I think that's something that's a good thing for us to listen, to learn, is that temperance, that you can have both in the proper proportions. And he loved life, and he was with his friends, and so what happened, right? He died at 15 and a half. How did this happen? Well, when he was at the beginning of the school year, a lot of kids were sick, and he kind of was sick too. That a lot of kids had the flu, and they figured, oh yeah, he's just got the flu like everybody else. But then he kept getting sicker, and the other kids started getting better. And eventually they took him to the doctors, and they discovered that he had leukemia. It was a very fast-acting leukemia. From the first day, he was little few aches and pains and kind of feeling tired, to, dying was about 10 days. He was only in the hospital for about 2 or 3 days. It was a very, very fast-acting illness. He said a few things that were really interesting that we can learn from while he was in the hospital. The doctors and nurses would ask him if he was in pain, because a lot of people, who have this illness, he was very swollen, and they know from other people it's a very painful illness, and he would never complain. Even at night when he was having trouble sleeping, they'd say, oh, do you want me to get your mother? And he'd say, no, she's tired, let her sleep, right? He was always concerned for others, and he wouldn't complain. Instead, he would say, others suffer more than I do, and I'm offering all my suffering for the Pope, for the church, and that I goes directly to heaven. Already a few months prior, earlier that summer, he told his mother that he wanted to go directly to heaven. He didn't want to stop in purgatory. He made it a goal for himself. This is a goal we should all have. We all have goals in life, right? We might want to go on vacation somewhere. When I talk to confirmation students, they have, whatever they want to be when they grow up, right? They want to go to college, they want to do this. Okay, we have goals in life, and that's great. It's good to have goals. Might I suggest we all add another goal to that list of goals, that we want to go straight to heaven. And that's a doable goal. That was God's plan for us, right? God's plan for us was to live a good life on earth, to love and serve him on earth, and then to go directly to be with him in heaven. Purgatory is just that extra grace that God gives us when we're not quite ready to see him face to face. But it was his plan that we should go straight to heaven to be with him. And we can make that our goal. Any goal we have in life, you want to take a big cruise or something, and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to save, so much money every week. We'll put it in our piggy bank. We're going to make sure we keep putting money aside and plan for this. Okay, if you make it your goal and you think about it every day, your life will be different, because you're going to work toward that goal. You're not going to forget to say the rosary. You're not going to forget to visit Jesus in the tabernacle. You'll be a kinder, more gentler person. You'll go to confession more often. So you can make that goal a reality. He also said something else. He said, I'm not afraid to die, because I've lived my whole life and I never did anything displeasing to God. Wow, how beautiful is that? Can we all say that? Wouldn't it be great if we could? If you're like me and you feel like you can't say that your entire life you never did anything displeasing to God, again, we've got that beautiful gift of the Sacrament of Reconciliation. Go to confession and start new. Make June 9th the first day of the rest of your life, or from June 9th until the day you die, you never do anything displeasing to God. Again, make that a goal. his mother was obviously distraught. Her only son is dying, right? And it happened so suddenly. There's no warning. There's nothing. Just all of a sudden, here he is on his deathbed. And he told his mother that he would send her signs that he was in heaven with Jesus. Because he knew. I mean, they're trying to save him. They're trying to do this procedure, whatever. He knew. He's like, God has given me this beautiful, like, alarm clock, whatever. This is my time, and I know. Mama, I want to go home, but I'm not going to make it out of here alive. But I will send you signs that I'm with Jesus. His parents had not been able to have any more children after him. He died on October 12th of 2006. On October 12th, 2010, 4 years to the day, his parents had a set of twins, a boy and a girl, Michelle and Francesca. Michelle's the boy, it's like Michael, in Italian, and Francesca's the girl. So right now, there are these twins who are, 13 years old in Italy, who have this brother who's about to be a saint, who's probably is already in heaven. We believe he's already in heaven, but he's going to be officially recognized by the church as a canonized saint in the very near future. And somebody they didn't even meet, but his mother says they know of him obviously, and they talk to him. So, and it's understood that that's a gift through his intercession that to his parents. And his mom was 44 at the time when they were born. So it's kind of just a little kiss from him, right? So we have Carlos relics here. So let me say a few words about relics. So what is a relic? Relics come in 3 classes. A first-class relic is a part of the person's body. It's got their DNA. It could be hair, skin, bones, blood, something like that. A second-class relic is something that the person usually used in life, touched their body. It was intimate to them. A lot of times it's clothing. It could also be like for a priest or a bishop, like their mass vestments. It could be a breviary or a Bible, that type of thing, something that the person had touched and used in life. A third-class relic is a blessed or holy object that touches a first or second-class relic. So we had prayer cards here. So I think there's still some prayer cards. I don't know. So many people have come through. I don't even know what's run out or whatever. But we had some prayer cards. If you have a miraculous medal, if you have a scapular, your rosary, anything like that, touch that to the relics, and that would be, you're welcome to pick them up and venerate them. Okay. For those of you who are married here, your wedding rings were blessed at your nuptial mass. Those are also considered sacramental, so that's something else you can touch the relics. So make third-class relics for yourself while you're here. In 2009, there was a little boy named Mateus who was born in Brazil. And when Mateus was born, he had a really bad pancreas. It didn't work like at all, and it didn't look right. So when the doctors examined him, they did all the tests, they're like, yeah, it's just completely malformed, and it clearly wasn't working. He wasn't able to eat any solid foods. So his whole life he'd been on an all-liquid diet. Even with the all-liquid diet, he was always vomiting and having intense stomach pains. At the age of 4, he only weighed about 20 pounds. He needed maybe some sort of massive surgery or transplant. The doctors told his mother, he's too weak, he would never withstand the surgery. And they told the mother that they did not believe he would live to the age of 5. So he's 4 years old in 2013, and in Brazil, the priest had known about Carlo, and he got a shirt, it's like a clothing, a second-class relic, right? And they had like a prayer service. At the end of that, the people could come up and venerate the relic. And at this point, he's Venerable Carlo, and the mother of Mateus asked him, says, pray for something, ask Carlo for something. So what does he ask for? I mean, he's 4 years old, he spent his entire life vomiting. He asked to stop vomiting, right? So as soon as he touched that relic, he was instantly and miraculously cured. No more stomach pains, he's able to eat. He went home that night, his older brothers and sisters are having steak for dinner, and he's eating steak, and he's fine. I mean, steak's not your normal first food, and he's fine. And when they go to the doctors, they examine him, and they're like, I don't know, like, how did this happen? Like, how did you get like some surgery or a transplant, or like what? Like, there's no scar tissue, and it was just a heavenly, miraculous cure, a healing of a nuked pancreas. That was the miracle that was accepted as being the miracle for Carlo's beatification. So the miracle happened in 2013, and Carlo was beatified in 2020, 10/10/20. I'm sure you've all heard on the news about 2 weeks ago that the miracle for his canonization has just been accepted. Now, that miracle has to happen after. The way it works is after the beatification, you look for new miracles. And I know when I was with his mother last August, she was telling me about it, and she was really hoping that this would be the one because it happened in Italy. It was a young girl, about maybe 18 or so. She was a student in Florence, and she was from Costa Rica. And she was a student in Florence, and she was like riding her bike, and she fell like off a ditch or something, and really hit her head badly, so much so that she had severe brain swelling, and they told her parents that she was dying. And her parents flew up from Costa Rica to see her, and they went to the tomb of Carlo and prayed, and she was miraculously cured. So the date, I don't believe the date of the canonization is set yet. I think I heard that like July 1st they're going to make the announcement. So it's soon. It's going to be in the next, year or so. So, but please, just because we have a miracle for canonization doesn't mean, many, many more miracles can happen. We've already had like several with the relics that I have. When I saw Antonia last August, she gave me another relic. I had the original one, which had his hair. It was just the first class relic of his hair. And when I met with her, she says, "Oh, so you want a relic, right?" And I said, "Oh, no, I have one. That's okay." I'm like, "Well, be honest, right?" And then about 20 minutes later, she's like, "You want a relic, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, I have one, but if you're offering another one." So she gave me a very special one. She'd had it ready, planned. She was just waiting for me to ask for it. And I didn't want to be greedy, So this one it's what's the one over here. It has 4 sections. The top 2 sections are first-class relics. It's hair. Well, I think on the left, there's skin on the left, and on the right, as you're looking at, is hair. So you'll see like a little flower, and there's little black strands in the flower. Those are both first class. On the bottom part, there's 2 sections. That's second class. It's clothing, and then there's wood from his original coffin. So originally, when he died, he was buried in the ground like everybody else. But then around 2020, when they exhumed his body in preparation for the beatification, they took some of the wood, I think, from the original coffin, and that's what's there. Now he's in a glass coffin. There's a picture, I don't know where, somewhere. There's a poster that shows that's what he looks like today, just in the coffin. Right? So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the miracles in the exhibit. They are categorized right here by an alphabetical order, if you haven't had a chance to see it. Like I said, we'll be open for at least a few. We're not going to shut the door while people are reading the posters. I'm not pulling posters off like right under your nose. They are alphabetized by country, so like Argentina, and then Austria, and then Belgium kind of thing, and then by city, alphabetically by city within the country. And then the very end, there's just some saints, some different saints, not really in any particular order, although there's 4 really cool ones who lived on the Eucharist alone for like between 20 and 50 years or something, just 36 years, crazy. They ate nothing but the Eucharist, and they're right at the end. So there's other ways you could, lump them together, and so sometimes people say, "Oh, but all these miracles have to do with animals," and there's a lot of miraculous things with animals. For those who, we all like St. Anthony, right? As soon as you can't find your glasses or your wallet or your keys, St. Anthony to the rescue. So St. Anthony was involved in a miracle. You look in Italy under Rimini with a donkey or a mule or something. So that's there. There's some with natural disasters, like in Colombia when there was a tsunami coming, it's going to wipe out this tiny island, and the priest took the monstrance to the shore and held it up, and then this wave comes and just goes back. So fires and floods and natural disasters. There's some times where people have tried to do inappropriate things with the Eucharist, steal the host from Mass. I definitely don't recommend that. And bad things would happen, or something would happen to them. And then there's a whole group of miracles that the host changed to flesh and blood. So I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. The most famous one, I think that most people have heard of, is probably the first one was Lanciano in Italy around 750, where this priest was doubting. And it bothered him because he's like, "No, I'm a priest, I'm supposed to believe, but why don't I believe?" And he's praying for an answer, and he was like, "Maybe am I losing my faith?" Because he was doubting in the true presence. And when he celebrated Mass, when he elevated the host, it changed to flesh. And in the chalice, it changed to blood, like blood. I mean, it always, every Mass, there's a change. It becomes Jesus, body, blood, soul, and divinity. But we don't normally see that change. In this case, you could actually see the change. And, obviously he confessed his doubts, and he was, crying that this was like, "Thank you, Jesus, for showing me this." That in Lanciano, that's still there. You can still see it today. In fact, as part of the pilgrimage we're doing in October is going to be on the life of Carlo and some of the miracles. So we're going to be going to Milan and Turin, seeing some of the miracles in Turin, and then in Florence, We're going to be at Assisi at his body, and also going to Lanciano where the famous miracle is, and then also in Rome, there's some miracles in the exhibit. So some of the ones you see there, we're going to go there and also go in the footsteps of his life. But lately, there have been some other ones that are similar to Lanciano. And I want to just, rather than looking at them all individually, but there's been Mexico and Poland and Argentina. Rather than talk about the individual, let's just kind of I'm going to lump them together like a little story. So sometimes people would find a host that's not where it should be. Like the sacristan might tell the priest after Mass, "Oh, Father, I found this in the back of the church," or something. And there's some reason that, like, what happened here? And so what the priest can do in those situations is he can consume the host, and that's fine. That's what but, in these cases, it might have been in a dusty, dirty place. They don't really know what the origin was, what happened. They don't feel as comfortable with that. So what you can do is you can put it back in the ciborium, add a little water. It'll dissolve over time. Just put it back in the tabernacle. A few days, a week later, it'll dissolve. And then there's a special sink in the sacristy where things from Mass will be disposed of. It'll go like directly under the church. It's not going to go in the sewage system like every other sink. And that would be the proper way to clean anything from Mass. So that was the intention. But they put it in the tabernacle, and then, like a week later, like it hadn't dissolved. And furthermore, it's like changing. Like there's some reddish tinge to it or something. Like, what is this, mold or something? Like they're trying to figure out. So they would just put it back and say, well, we'll check next week. Maybe it'll be dissolved then. And like this goes on like week after week. And sometimes a month after month. It can be like years. Some of these are like years later when finally they ask the bishop, like, okay, what's going on here? Can we, get approval to study this or something? I mean, like, priests don't have a special class in seminary. Like, what do you do when the host is changed into flesh and blood? Like, nobody knows what to do with it. So finally, even the bishop, right? So finally, at a certain point, the bishop would grant permission to study it. So what would they find? Just like the host in Lanciano, it's type AB blood type, which is a very rare blood type. It's human blood, right? It's the same blood type as the people from the Middle East, very common in the Middle East, and the same blood type as the Shroud of Turin. And then they got, kind of clever one time, and they said, we're kind of curious, because some of the earlier investigators, they knew where it came from. They knew that they were looking at something from a host, and they said, why don't we give a sample to somebody who has no idea where this came from, sight unseen? And they found a man in New York, Dr. Frederick Zuckerby, who was from Rockland County, the chief coroner, who's a forensic pathologist. So he's used to dealing with dead bodies and of unknown origin, like, the police come and find this body, who is it, right? He also wrote a book on, like, I think it's called Circulation or something, on the heart. He's a cardiologist. So he's a cardiologist and he's a forensic pathologist, the perfect person. And we tell him, okay, we're gonna give you the sample and you tell us, like, tell what, we don't know, you're gonna tell us what happened. And I want to read an exact, like the quote of it. These are his findings. So again, right away, it's human blood, it's human DNA. It's got type AB blood, right? And then he said this patient had blood clots. He must not have been able to breathe at times. He wasn't getting enough oxygen. Every breath must have been painful for him, and he must have been utterly exhausted. He probably received blows to the chest. Furthermore, the heart must have been dynamically active, meaning living, at the moment when you brought me the sample. We found intact white blood cells, which can only be transported in the bloodstream. So if there were white blood cells present, it can only be because you brought it to me while it was still beating. So what is he saying to them? He's basically saying, who did you just torture and kill? What kind of monsters are you? Like, right? Because this guy was merciless torture. You didn't let him breathe. He wasn't getting oxygen. He was beaten around the chest. And furthermore, you didn't even wait till he was actually dead before you started cutting into his heart to grab some heart tissue. That's what he's saying, having no idea where this comes from. Like, what kind of monsters are you people? In reality, what's he telling us? What's the story he's telling us? He's giving us the story of the crucifixion, right? This is Christ's passion and death. This is what Jesus suffered. He must not have been able to breathe at times, because how do you die in crucifixion? You asphyxiate, right? You can't, when you're hanging in that let's say awkward to say the least position, with your arms up above your head and your body's sagging, you can't breathe, you can't get oxygen in, and your lungs start to fill with fluid. In order to take a single breath, what Jesus had to do is he had to pull up on his hands, which were nailed to the cross. He had to push up on his feet, which were also nailed to the cross. He was going to enlarge and irritate every single wound, to raise himself up just an inch or so to take a breath. And let's be clear, I'm sure that the real crucifix, the real cross, did not have those beautiful smooth finishes of many crucifixes we have in our homes, right? Like the gorgeous olive wood stuff. It didn't look like that. I'm sure it had jagged edges and his back had already been whipped to shreds. So now he's irritating, catching splinters on the way up, okay? For 3 hours. Every breath, how long can you go without breathing? 20 seconds? You got to wait as long as possible because it's going to be torture upon torture. And he did all that for each one of us. If we were the only one in all of eternity that needed to be saved, he would have suffered like that for each of us. What does he ask for in return? Well, start with, thank you, Jesus, I love you. Come to church as often as you can. Stop by, even not Mass for sure, but even when it's not Mass time, stop by the church, visit Jesus in the tabernacle. Thank you, Jesus, I love you. You know, he gave us the 10 Commandments. It's pretty clear on what to do, what not to do. And this is why I think Carlo is going to be a saint. All that work is beautiful, but really it was just that beautiful, pure love of Jesus. The work he did was really an extension of that. It was the fruit of just the way he loved Jesus. And we can all love Jesus like that. Now, we're not going to make posters. We're all called to be saints in different ways. We're not going to do the same work Carlo did, but we can all love Jesus like he did. A couple final thoughts. It's always myocardial muscle tissue in every sample. And between the theologians and the doctors, they've said, why is that? And they say, it's no accident it's myocardial tissue, because that's the muscle that gives life to the entire heart, in the same way that the Eucharist gives life to the heart of the church. And also it comes from the left ventricle. Why the left ventricle? Because the left ventricle is the source of purified blood, in the same way that Jesus is the one who purifies the church of her sins. Final thought. Whenever they look at the blood, they know it's human blood and they can find DNA, but then they can't sequence the DNA. And they're like, why can't, this is unique. Every other sample, they're like, it's either not human blood, or it's not enough of a sample to get some DNA present, or there is DNA and here's the whole sequence. But this one's different. Like, yeah, we know there's human blood, and we know we can see that there's DNA, but we can't extrapolate it out. We can't extract it and say, here's the sequencing. Well, all of us had a human mother and a human father. Jesus did not. He had a human mother, but not a human father. And so apparently, his blood is that much more unique than ours. So I don't know if anyone has a general question they think for the whole group, something I might have missed. If not, I will be around for a little bit. Do you have a question? Yeah. The dolphins. Well, I have more stories. Okay. There was one time that Carlo loved animals, right? His favorite animals, he loved dolphins. And one time he told his mother that he had asked Jesus for a favor. Okay, now when Jesus is your best friend, you can ask him for favors, right? We should all feel this comfortable with Jesus. We should all feel like Jesus is our best friend. Like you would ask your best friend, to help you, you're moving one day or you need help with this, right? So he tells Jesus, I would really like to see the dolphins, right? And so about a little while later, they're out in the ocean, and there come the dolphins, right? There was he really loved his animals, and they were in a CC one time, and they were running around. They were in a CC all day, and at the end of the day, they said, let's let the dogs off the leash and let them run. These are their two favorite dogs, and they go running, and the CC is very hilly, and they go running, and they jump off like this cliff. And Mama and Grandma are like horrified. They're like, oh my gosh, our favorite dogs, they're dead. There was this huge drop. They didn't survive. Like, Carlo's unconcerned. He's like, oh, that's fine. They're fine. Jesus took care of them. And of course, Mother and Grandmother are really not like, okay. They're worried they're gonna like go around the corner, walk all the way down and find these dead dogs there. And sure enough, they walk down, and they're the two dogs just waiting for him, wagging their tails. And that night, his mother heard a voice telling her, I saved those dogs for Carlo. It was no accident. It wasn't a shorter drop than Mom and Grandma realized. No, they were headed for certain death. They were miraculously saved. because Carlo's best friend is Jesus, right? We should all think of Jesus as our best friend in that same way. Because in reality, Jesus, from his perspective, he loves us like that, right? It's us who are limiting ourselves and not seeing him as our best friend. All right, well, thank you so much. Enjoy the exhibit.